Well, welcome back again. Tonight is week 5 of our Deep series, and we got one more week left before we start our new series, and that's kind of why we're going to have a Mario Kart tournament, kind of an extra fun night to just like celebrate the end of our first series together. And I'm so jacked just about this whole series and to be here with you guys. And in this Deep series, we've been exploring what it means to go deeper in our relationship with Jesus. And this week, we're going to talk about how everyone has a role to play in God's kingdom. How we're called to get involved in each other's lives. So, has anyone heard of the 5 love languages? Yeah, some of you. The 5 love languages are like, they're 5 ways to express and experience love. Does anybody know what the 5 love languages are? Anybody shout them out? No? All right. The 5 love languages are words of affirmation, acts of service, physical touch, quality time, and giving. And so, like, words of affirmation. Words of affirmation is like saying kind things to each other. It's like being encouraging or like telling someone that they're doing a great job. And then like acts of service is obviously doing things for other people or having people do things for you. And physical touch, I know I heard the middle schoolers giggle, haha, it's funny, but it's like a hand on the shoulder or like hugging someone. Like some people just like feel loved by physical touch. And then quality time is just exactly that. It's spending time together, and gifts, super obvious, is like either giving or receiving gifts. So with these 5 love languages, each of us has a way that we express love to one another and a way that we experience love, a way of like giving love and a way of receiving love. And sometimes, for some people, it's the same for both. It's the same for giving and for receiving. And sometimes they're different. And you can even have multiple. In fact, most people have multiple love languages. And as I talk about these love languages, I don't want you guys to think about like love in the mushy-gushy, lovey-dovey type of love. Like, I know that Valentine's Day was just on Friday, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. I want you guys to think about love in like the biblical kind of way, like love your neighbor as yourself kind of way, like care for each other kind of way. Or, if it helps, think about it in terms of tacos. Yeah. I love tacos. So check it out. For me, my love language is acts of service. The way that I give love, the way that I show that I love somebody is by making tacos for them, right? And then the way that I feel loved by people is I need to be told that my tacos are delicious. So the way that I give love is by acts of service, and the way that I receive love is by words of encouragement. But there's a kicker to this, right? So I said that I give love by making tacos and receive love by being told that my tacos are good. But for an example, my wife feels loved by me when I ask her to go out for tacos. So her love language is quality time. And then the way that she shows love is also quality time. So the way that she tells people that she loves them is by asking them to go out for tacos. Now, I said that this is a kicker because in order for someone to receive love from you, you have to speak their language. So for me to feel loved by my wife, I need to hear that my tacos are delicious. Right? She wants to ask me to go out to get tacos, but I don't receive love that way. I need her to tell me that my tacos are delicious, right? So even though she wants to show me love by going out to get tacos, that's not how it works. And the same thing goes for me. Like, I want to make tacos for my wife, but she doesn't feel loved when I make her tacos. She feels loved when I ask her to go out and get tacos. Now, I know that the taco example is a silly illustration. And you might be wondering, like, what in the world does tacos or the 5 love languages have to do with the role that each of us play in God's kingdom? Or, like, what does that have to do with how we're called to be involved in each other's lives? Especially when we're talking about, like, going deeper in our relationship with Jesus. But let's think about this. As followers of Jesus, we're supposed to love each other, right? Like in Romans 12:9, it says, don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. In 1 Peter 3:8, it says, love each other as brothers and sisters. Matthew 19:19, love each other as much as you love yourself. We hear these types of things all the time. The Bible is littered with verses that tell us to love each other. And that's where I want to park tonight. I want to park on how going deeper in our relationship with Jesus means caring for each other. And you can't care for each other without doing anything, right? Like, you have to actually physically do something to care for people. And that's the same thing that we've been talking about this whole series. How as followers of Jesus, we can't just learn what the Bible has to say. We actually have to apply it to our lives and do something. So, let's go back to the love languages. Knowing your love language can help you understand how you experience the world. And it wasn't until I actually took the quiz for myself that I realized how passionate I was about serving other people. And even if acts of service isn't your love language, serving others is a really great way to get involved in each other's lives. It's a great way to care for each other. And serving others can come in all different forms, right? So there's this story in the Bible about Jesus feeding 5,000 people. And I'm sure most of you have heard it before. It's like a super popular story. But there's a particular detail that I bet most of us, myself included, skipped right past. In fact, the only reason that I noticed it is because Pastor Sam pointed it out to me and talked about it this Sunday. See, but the thing with this story is, I think it's just easy for us to skip past it because we think that we know it already. We get this sense that we've heard it 1,000 times, and yeah, Jesus did a bunch of miracles, and that's awesome, but that's also what Jesus does, and so it's not a big deal, and we just know the story. So tonight, we're going to break it down a little bit. We're going to read the story out of the book of Matthew, and it's going to be up on the screen, but before we read it, I want to give you guys a little bit of context. So the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 is actually the only story in all 4 Gospels that shows up in each of the Gospels. The Gospels, if you guys don't know, is like the story of Jesus' life. And each of them gives us a little bit different, a little bit more detail into Jesus' life. And this story in particular is the only one that shows up in all 4 of the Gospels. And so in the book of Matthew, the story that happens right before Jesus feeds 5,000 people is the story of John the Baptist getting his head cut off. That's crazy, right? Now, that's a story for another time, but what you need to know is that John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin. And he came before Jesus started his ministry, and basically his main role was to tell people that Jesus was coming, that the Savior of the world was coming. So, here we go. Jesus feeds the 5,000. It's in Matthew 14, 13 through 21. It says this: when Jesus heard what had happened, getting his head cut off, his cousin, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. And hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot. Quick pause. Man, I would be so upset. I'm my cousin just was brutally murdered, and I'm trying to escape all these people that are hoarding me and go mourn a little bit, and they just follow me. I don't know about you guys, but I would be like, people, get away. Not Jesus. So then, when Jesus gets off the boat and sees the large crowd, he has compassion on them and heals their sick. So, not only was he not upset that they followed him, but then he starts healing people. So then, as evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away, so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." And Jesus replied to them, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." To which the disciples answered, "We only have 5 loaves and 2 fish." Jesus said, "Bring them here to me," and then he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. Everyone ate and was completely satisfied, and the disciples picked up the 12 baskets full of what was left over. And the number of people who ate was about 5,000 men, not including the women and children. So this story comes with multiple miracles, right? First, Jesus heals a bunch of people, and then he turns 5 loaves of bread and a couple of fish into enough food to feed 5,000 men plus the women and children. And not just feeding them, right? It says that everybody was completely satisfied, and there was more leftovers than there even was food to begin with. Now, these miracles in and of themselves are a pretty big deal, right? We overlook them because it's just what Jesus does, but it shows that Jesus was both man and God. And the finer detail that I want to point out that I mentioned earlier, and it actually ties back to the love languages and specifically caring for each other, is that Jesus gave the bread to the disciples, and it was the disciples that served the people the food. Hear me out. Jesus multiplied the food, right? And it was Jesus that performed all the miracles. And he's the perfect example of what it looks like to care for people. And he's also this really great leader. And an important thing about being a leader is that you empower others. And so not only was he performing miracles, but he empowered the disciples to serve others as well. He gives us an example of how to care for each other by the way that he lives. We get to see that when we read the Bible. But then he gives us opportunities to care for each other and to serve each other. Think about it. Think about it this way. The disciples were with Jesus all day, right? And so they were traveling around with Jesus, so it's likely that they were probably pretty hungry too. And they could have been like, man, let's just eat a little bit first, and then we'll hand it out to everybody. Or they could have even been worried that there wasn't going to be enough to go around, so they just hoarded it all for themselves. But they didn't. But isn't that what we do with the blessings that God gives us? I probably do that. Think about all the blessings that God has given us. We live in America. We're like one of the most prosperous nations in the world. And most of us have more than enough food to eat. We have more than enough clothes to wear. And we just live in this world of like me first, right? We get so caught up in ourselves and trying to make sure we get our fill first. We take the blessings that God gives us and we make sure that we get ours before we decide that we're going to share it with others. If we even decide to share it with others. Sometimes, or maybe even most of the time, we take the blessings God gives us and we just keep it all for ourselves. And I'm not sitting up here on a soapbox like I don't do that and all you guys do that, because I do it too. And most of us are way more blessed than we realize. Listen, God doesn't bless us so that we can bask in the glory of our own pleasures and desires. God blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others. In 1 Peter 4:10 it says, "Each of you has been blessed with one of God's many wonderful gifts to be used in the service of others. So use your gift well." Another version says it this way: "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others." And that's what the disciples did, right? Jesus provided the blessing, and he left it up to the disciples to share it. Now, blessings can come in all different forms, right? You talked about it a little bit in your small groups today, how there's spiritual gifts. You talked about like the gifts and talents that you've been given. There's other blessings like physical or material things, or you can be blessed with an abundance of time. There's all these things that we are blessed with. So, before you leave here tonight, I just want to challenge you guys. I know we're running a little bit behind on time. Try not to focus on the time. Try to focus on this challenge, because I want to challenge you guys to think about what God has blessed you with. Has God blessed you with an abundance of things? Is your closet filled with clothes you never wear or toys you never use? Or how about your time? Has God blessed you with an abundance of time? Or I don't know, maybe you have a skill that other people don't have that you can use to help them with. Whatever it is, think about it. Because I want to challenge you to take the blessings that God has given you and use them to serve others. Because here's the point. God blesses us so that we can be a blessing to others. To go deeper in your relationship with Jesus, get involved in each other's lives. Care for each other. Use the blessings God has given you. As you're lying in bed tonight, I just want you to think, how can I be a blessing to others?